Welcome to the Plumsail Forms for SharePoint tutorial. Today we are diving deep into working with date and time fields in Plumsail Forms using JavaScript. We'll cover everything from getting and setting field values to advanced date calculation and customizing the date picker's appearance. Let's get started. Here is the form I've designed with Plumsail. Let's open it in the designer, and I'm going to define FD globally so that I can address fields right from the browser console. I go to the JavaScript editor and type window.fd equal fd and say the form to all form types at once. All properties for the date field can be found in the documentation, in SharePoint Fields section. I'll add the direct link to the description. Let's select the current date. And first, let's look at how to get the date field value. Let's log it to the console. You can copy the code from the documentation, but don't forget to update the field internal name in the code. To find the internal name of a field, open the form in the designer, select the field, and find the name property. Copy and use in the code. The value of the field is a date object. To display the date in a more human-readable format, you can use the toLocalString method. When the field is in a read-only mode or when you're working with a display form, you can also get the displayed date value using the display value property. Let's open the display form to test it. As you see, the code returns the formatted date value as a string. Let's go back to the edit form. Now let's set the value of the date field. For this, you need to create a date object using the new date constructor. Let's change the start date field to the current date. Here we go. Next, if you want to set a specific date and time, you have a few options for creating the date object. The first way is to use a string inside the date method. Let it be September the 1st. You can also specify the time if a field includes time. And don't forget about quotes. I find this one the easiest. Another way is to specify the year, month, and day one by one down to milliseconds if necessary. Let's see how it works. Okay, let's start with the year. The month count is 0 based, meaning January is 0, so December is 11, not 12. Keep this in mind. And then it will be 24. Some time, and down to milliseconds. If you want to explore all the options that comes with the new date constructor, I'll leave a link in the description. And also Google is your best friend. You'll find tons of instructions and examples there. Alright, now let's say we need to set the date field to 3 days from today. You can use the native JavaScript setDate method, which is good for simple calculations. But for more complex date manipulations, I suggest using the Luxon library. I also find Luxon syntax a lot easier compared to the native date methods. Luxon is a modern successor to the Moment.js library, by the way. Let's start with adding days to date. I'll copy the code from the Plumsail documentation and add it to the JavaScript editor. Let's take a look at what this code does. The required.js function loads the library from the external link. You can use the same method to load any other external libraries. Next, inside the SP_rendered event, once the script is loaded, we get the current date with the Luxon function. Next, we add days to the current date with the plus method. Here you can specify days, month, minutes, whatever you want. And the final line is that we set the field with a new calculated date. Before testing, don't forget to update the field name in the code. That's what I'll do now, and then I'll save the form. Let's see how it works. And let's open the edit form. So the date has changed, and today's date is April 1st, and plus 3 days it is April 4th. Next, let's test subtraction. We can test it from the browser console. As the Luxon library is already loaded, I only need the part of the code that does the calculation. So I'll remove the rest. And let's change the plus function to minus. And we will subtract month. Don't forget to update the field name again. And today is April 1st. Then 3 months prior would be January 1st. All works. So next level is to add or subtract days from the date, excluding non-business days. I'll copy the code for this from the documentation and paste it to the JavaScript editor. Here we load 2 external libraries. One is Luxon and the second is a plugin for business days. And as before, we get today's date. In the calculation here we use minus business days and plus business day methods. And here the fields are populated with a new calculated value. Let's update the internal name for both fields. And save the form. Now when we open the form, the date fields are populated. Let's check. By default, the weekends are Saturday and Sunday, so they are skipped in the calculation. We've added 7 days to today's date, excluding weekends. So instead of April 8th, we see April 10th. And subtracted 3 days. One skips Sunday and Saturday, and 2, 3, March 27th. You can also define your work schedule with the code. I'll copy this part of the code from the documentation. You can also define holidays, but here I'll remove it. Okay. So what does this code do? This line here loads the library local settings. The workweek constant defines the work week, the 1 is Monday and 7 is Sunday. And we've set up business days, we define the work week. I'll make the work week a bit longer, so there is only 1 day off, Saturday. Save the form, and let's see how the dates are calculated now. Now it is April 9th and March 28th. Next, let's find the difference between 2 dates. Here is the code example in the documentation. What we do have here? We have a function that does the calculation. It is called onFormLoad, and then the value of 2 fields on the form are changed. Inside the function there are 2 constants that store field values. Next, if both field values are valid, it transforms the dates to ISO string and then does the calculation. First goes the date from which we will subtract. Next, the diff function. You can read this line as end date minus start date so that you can understand it better. And you can define the units in which the difference must be calculated. It could be hours, month. In this example it is days. And the last line populates the field on the form with the result. Let's test it from the browser. For it, I only need the code inside the require function. Copy and paste. I do this because Luxon library is already loaded and I can test this part of the code right from the browser console. And I need to update the field names in the code. I need internal name of the difference field. Here we go, and let's test. And so when I change the values of the date fields on the form, the difference between the dates is calculated automatically. The function can also return negative values. So let's shift the start and end date. So the formula would be start date minus end date and test. Here we go, we have a negative value. You can also find the difference between dates excluding non-working days. Find the code examples for the calculation based on site regional settings in the documentation. Moving on, you can customize the appearance of the date field. The widget options property holds all the settings for the date field, from the date format to the calendar view. The field widget is based on the candle date time picker, so you can find a detailed explanation of each property in their documentation. Let's start with the date format. By default, the format of a selected date matches the site locale. However, you can change it with the format property. Let it be year, month, and the date. As you see, the formatting of the two fields is different now. You can also add a week number to the calendar view. By default, this property is set to false. Let's set it to true. And here is the calendar with the week number. For comparison, here is a default calendar view. You can also set the start view of the calendar. The default view is month, so when you open the calendar, you need to select the date. But you can change it to be decade or year. So let's start with the decade. So when you open the calendar, you first need to select the year, and then month and date. Let's change the start view to year, and then you open the calendar, you will see the current year. Click on the month and then select the date. Together with the start view, you can define the depth to limit the navigation between views for a user. Let's set the start date to decade and the depth to year. Okay, as you see, I can't select a specific date. I can only select a month. If you want users to be able to select only dates in a specified date range, you can define minimum and maximum dates available in the calendar. Let's make it a date range from 2 days before today's date and plus 7 days. Define the widget properties with these dates. Let's see how it works. In addition to that, you can disable specific weekdays. Let's disable Saturday and Sunday using the disable dates property. So I will disable Saturday and Sunday. Now, besides limited dates, I can select April 5th and April 6th. Using the same property, you can disable certain dates, April 4th and April 7th. Let's see the calendar, and I can select these dates. The advanced way to disable dates in the calendar is to create a function that disables weekdays and certain dates at once. Let's write it together, but you can find the example in the Plumsail documentation. So I create a constant to store dates that I want to disable. Okay. I add the condition. Then inside the condition, I write what dates should be disabled. So first is if the date is equal 0. 0 is Sunday, and 1 is Monday, and so on. The second check is to disable dates if it is Saturday, so equal 6. And the last one checks whether the date is specified in the dates constant. And if it is, then disable this date. Let's fix some typos and let's test. So I can select the April 4th, April 5th, April 6th and April 7th. All works. And instead of manually defining the work week, you can get this data from the site regional settings. So here is the work week settings on my site. I'll make Tuesday and Wednesday non-working days and save. Let's refresh the page and open the form. The information about a work schedule is stored in SP page context info.webtimezonesdata.workhours and workdays. And the value is a bit mask. I'll copy the code from the Plumsail documentation. So the first constant stores the work schedule for the current site. Weekdays stores the list of weekdays and is used in the non-working days function. The function transforms the bitmask to an array of weekdays that are non-working. And the final line defines the weekdays that must be disabled. I'll update the field internal name. And let's test. So all Tuesdays and Wednesdays are disabled and cannot be selected. Just like with the calendar, you can set the minimum and maximum times that users can pick in the drop-down. I'll add a date field that includes time to the form. As you see, the time picker allows selecting 1 AM and 11 PM, and I want to limit this. I'll use the code from the documentation to limit these time options. So, copy the code. So, two constants here store dates with time. The first is 9 AM and the second is 5:30 PM. And to define available options in a dropdown, we use widget.timeview.setOptions method and set the minimum and maximum properties. Update the field internal name, and let's check. Now I see only options from 9 AM to 5:40 PM. And you can get the work time from the original settings as we did before. In my case, it is 8 AM to 5 PM. Let's copy the code for that from the documentation. Paste. And I need to update the internal name. So here the time schedule is stored as minutes from midnight, which is why we divide it by 60 to get the workday start and end hour. Okay, let's test. And now in the drop-down I can select time from 8 AM to 5 PM only. And that's it for today's tutorial on working with date and time fields in Plumsail Forms. We've covered a lot, from basic operations to advanced calculations and customizations. Remember to check the video description for links. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comments, in the Plumsail community, or contact the Plumsail support team. Thanks for watching and see you in the next videos.